What does Kaido truly want, and why does he want it? Despite the incredible length of the Wano story arc, a clear understanding of Kaido's motivation remains elusive. I suspect an upcoming flashback will finally shed light on the earliest chapters of Kaido's life, but what might we learn about the reigning king of beasts? We know some scattered details about Kaido's past, including his history with the Rocks pirates. In earlier sections, I discussed in depth Kaido's potential history with the Kurozumi clan and the land of Wano, as well as his turbulent relationship with Yamato. Yet I believe Kaido's present worldview was likely shaped by a yet-to-be-identified figure from his past, who acted as Kaido's dark mentor. As we will soon discuss, inherited will is one of the central themes in One Piece, and fittingly we have seen mentor figures, positive and negative, play a prominent role throughout the series. Kaido is such a fascinating character because he's an enigma, a mystery to be solved, but identifying the influence of this dark mentor figure may be particularly illuminating. All of Kaido's efforts until this point have been in service of his goal of starting a global war. We have further learned over the course of the Wano story arc that Kaido, having reached the pinnacle of strength, hopes to close the circle of his warrior's path by achieving a brilliant warrior's death. We do not yet understand why he wants to accomplish this. Essentially, we know what Kaido wants, but not why he wants it, and this is quite significant. Part of the reason Kaido is still such an unknown quantity is because this crucial part of his story is still missing. By comparison, we have a much better understanding of Big Mom, which is part of the reason she has been such an interesting and menacing villain over the past 200 chapters. To explain this difference, let's compare Big Mom and Kaido. Big Mom's goal is to create utopian Candyland where all of the races in the One Piece world live in harmony. Under her tyrannical thumb, after Caesar synthesizes a way to forcibly transform them all into giants so that she no longer has to deal with the emotional baggage birthed by her immense size and monstrous appetite. Importantly, we don't just know the what for Big Mom, but also the why. Her backstory with Mother Carmel explains the disastrous cause of her emotional trauma, which imbues her character with pathos presently missing for Kaido. We know what Kaido wants, but why is Kaido?
Why are you the way that you are?
His desire to start a global war and achieve a brilliant warrior's death is thematically linked to the motif of the animal kingdom, nature red in Tooth and Claw, but we have no clue when these values were instilled in Kaido. Admittedly, Oda hasn't always provided backstory for his villains to explain their motivating desire, but more often than not, readers are left knowing more than their surface-level ambition. Even for those villains whose backstories weren't revealed in full during the arcs in which they acted as primary antagonists, Oda has clearly imagined and left hints toward facets of their character likely to be revealed in the future. Crocodile, Eneru, and Lucci are prime examples of antagonists whose ambitions are yet to be fully understood. With solid evidence, Oda will deliver answers at some point in the future. For example, Crocodile returned in Impel Down, and Iva hinted at a yet untold backstory. We further learned he had an antagonistic history with Whitebeard. Importantly, his liberation has seemingly allowed him to make his way into the New World and build a new organization in place of Baroque works during the 2-year time skip. Eneru originated from the Sky Island Birka, which may have connections to Elbaf, and his voyage to the ancient lunar city in a later cover story arc is likely to have major ramifications in the future. Lucci's reputation as legendary assassin was explained by an incident in his younger years, and he has now worked his way into a position among the elite officers of CP0, which indicates he will again someday clash with the Straw Hat Pirates. Importantly, these aspects of their characters were not revealed during the Alabasta, Skypiea, and Water 7 arcs respectively, but Oda nevertheless provided hints that their stories would be expanded upon in the future before their initial exit from the ongoing narrative. The growing trend in the New World, however, is toward villains with rich, fully explained backstories. The past 2 major story arcs before Wano, Dressrosa and Whole Cake Island, feature flashback sequences centered on their central antagonists, Doflamingo and Big Mom respectively, which established the motivation for their current goals, and I expect Kaido will soon follow suit. At first glance, Kaido may seem to be a typical muscle-headed, power-hungry villain with shallow ambition, and admittedly it has taken much longer than usual for Oda to begin pulling back the curtain to grant readers deeper insight into Kaido's character. That may soon change, but I believe there's enough information already present in the narrative to begin piecing together a pretty clear picture of Kaido's character, and his relationship with Yamato is likely the key. From the moment Yamato was introduced into the narrative by name in Chapter 979 and on panel in Chapter 983, her contentious relationship with her father has been a focal point. Both Kaido and Yamato discussed this strained relationship with other characters, but it reached a boiling point in Chapter 1015 when Yamato at last confronted Kaido on the roof of Onigashima. In Chapter 1024, Kaido confirmed that during their battles, he has always been trying to kill Yamato, specifically because she wants to live as Oden. What's interesting is Kaido's stated reasoning. He makes it clear that this is not a family squabble, meaning it's not personal, which is certainly a strange sentiment when talking about a father and his daughter. This rationale reveals the incredible consistency of Kaido's warrior principles, regardless of any personal relationship he might have with his opponent. He told Yamato that if she wants to call herself Oden, she needs to be prepared for war, because this isn't a game. As far as we know, Kaido is ultimately looking for a place to die, a brilliant death to capstone his life as a warrior. Presumably, this desire is what motivates his attempts to initiate a global war, with his occupation of Wano serving as a means to that end. But he becomes incredibly serious in combat, and despite the fact that he enjoys challenge, tells Yamato it's not a game, that combat must be taken seriously, and that there are real stakes involved. Yamato and Kaido obviously don't see eye to eye when it comes to Kozuki Oden. Yamato believes Kaido is refusing her right to love and admire Oden, but from Kaido's perspective, Yamato taking on Oden's mantle is a declaration of war. Oden was a warrior, and declaring his name isn't something to take lightly. It's not a game of make-believe. Assuming the role of Oden means Yamato must be prepared to embody her hero in every sense, even to the point of death. Yamato needs to die to be like Oden, because to Kaido, Oden is not a representation of freedom. Oden was a great warrior, but he also failed to best Kaido. Kaido told Zoro that wounding him and leaving a scar should be taken as a badge of honor. In that sense, he respected Oden as a warrior because he was the one who left the 2 scars on Kaido's abdomen, but Oden's failure to strike down Kaido forever marks him as a failed warrior in Kaido's eyes. Kaido was looking for someone to best him in combat and take his life. He doesn't admire Oden's principles or strength because of this critical failing. Oden was unable to strike down Kaido, and thus in Kaido's eyes, his life ended in failure. Kaido seems to have no other framework for valuing individuals beyond strength, and because he's regarded as the strongest living creature, no one else quite measures up. As far as we're aware, Kaido's motivation is entirely self-serving. He's using Wano's natural borders to shield him from the world as he amasses an army in hopes of someday initiating a global war, which will help him achieve the brilliant warrior's death he so desperately craves. But does this line of dialogue suggest even deeper motivation? The sentiment expressed by Kaido in the scene implies a degree of moral complexity not yet fully reflected in his stated goals. Indeed, we have reason to believe there are more layers to Kaido despite his brutal and totalitarian reign of Wano, and his callous indifference to the suffering incurred by his occupation. For one, Kaido showed a surprising amount of concern for Jack after he was injured by Inurushi and Nekomamushi during the rooftop battle, which indicates he has more respect for his subordinates than is typical for villains of this type. Importantly, he emphasized Jack's strength and remaining utility as a warrior, so I wouldn't go so far as to call this real friendship or representative of genuine affection. Yet Kaido's meeting with King on Punk Hazard, shown in a brief flashback scene from chapter 1035, also echoed this same sentiment. Kaido asked King his name, which we learned to be Albert. However, Kaido decided not to call him Al, and instead gave him the name King as a signifier of his strength. As we have seen, Kaido is surprisingly loyal to those who submit to his leadership and also values his subordinates, though again he emphasized King or Albert's strength, further illustrating the primary basis of his value structure. We know Kaido always fights with killing intent, even against his own daughter, but outside of battle, he has only intentionally ended the lives of Kozuki Oden, a warrior too noble and proud to ever bend to Kaido's authority, and Orochi and Higurushi, both duplicitous snakes from the Kurozumi clan. Interestingly, the surviving members of the Kozuki clan are the only ones we have seen Kaido directly pursue with killing intent outside of battle, which likely speaks to the significance of his desire to maintain ownership of Wano. Kaido told Yamato that Wano is special and critical to his goals. Both Oden and Momonosuke challenge his rulership, and thus he's willing to execute them because he views doing so as somehow necessary. Kaido's rigid adherence to his warrior principles is one of his defining characteristics. His willingness to execute a child to maintain his rank and position, and to break the resolve of the people of Wano to maintain his hold over the land of samurai seems to be a significant deviation. This suggests that he potentially views Momo as fair game despite his age, because of either Momo's position as the nation's would-be leader, or because of whatever intrinsic quality makes his survival an imperative. The other possibility is that ruling Wano is so important to Kaido, he's willing to betray even his own principles to do so. Life is a series of simple questions with simple answers. Kaido is willing to strike down anyone in combat, but if they survive, he allows them to live as long as it takes for their will to be broken and for them to submit to his leadership. Again, I wouldn't say this means Kaido genuinely cares about the well-being of others, but it implies his value structure is entirely centered on strength. If a warrior acknowledges their inferiority and submits, they're free to join the Beast Pirates, even if they consider Kaido to be their enemy. At least outwardly, Kaido doesn't seem to particularly care if people hate him, including his subjects, his subordinates, and even his own child, as long as they submit to his leadership on the basis of his being the more powerful warrior. His words to Yamato imply he regards this as justifiable, which doesn't mean Kaido's values are correct, but does imply he views his actions as somehow necessary and beneficial to others or the larger world, rather than just himself. Kaido wants to start a global war, which, in keeping with his stated values, means creating a world where survival of the fittest becomes the governing principle. Kaido doesn't necessarily view the wake of death and destruction his actions would precipitate as detrimental because he places greater value on those who would possess the strength to survive. In Kaido's eyes, war is a necessary catalyst for the strong to deservedly live and the weak to deservedly die. The very first words which appear in the narration boxes accompanying Kaido's introduction in chapter 795 read, "The strong live and the weak die. That is the only rule of this world." These are the first words Oda chose to associate with Kaido, and thus they likely fundamentally inform his worldview. But how did Kaido arrive at this conclusion? Where did this ideology originate? It's important to remember Kaido is aware of elements of the world's history which aren't necessarily common knowledge. Joy Boy, the three ancient weapons, the road poneglyphs, and whatever quality makes Wano so unique and important to the One Piece world. Understanding how Kaido thinks, what he wants to accomplish, and why is likely connected to understanding how he acquired such arcane knowledge of the One Piece world. Kaido told King he's the only one who can change the world, which fits with what we know about other pirates vying for the title of Pirate King, all of whom want to reshape the world in some fashion, and that likely reflects Joy Boy's incomplete quest. It's for this reason King is convinced Kaido represents Joy Boy's return. In chapter 1025, Kaido became increasingly unhinged as he wore down Yamato's defenses, and eventually knocked her to the ground, granting us what appears to be the deepest insight into Kaido's character to date. He told Yamato that friendship is a sham, and that deep down, even those who claim to care about you are afraid. He told Yamato that she is the child of ogres, and thus must rule others with strength, that she is not meant to be friends with humans. We already know Kaido distrusts pirate alliances, but we further learned in this scene that he disbelieves in the very notion of friendship. Rocks may explain this in part, but I have a feeling Kaido's inability to trust others runs even deeper. And at this point, I just want to know who hurt Kaido to make him this way. To me, Kaido's words in this chapter scream projection. He's projecting his own fears and insecurities onto Yamato. He chastised Yamato for being alone when he was the very person responsible for keeping her isolated on Onigashima. In a sense, his treatment of Yamato represents a self-fulfilling prophecy. He doesn't allow anyone to show Yamato kindness and keeps her isolated on Onigashima because her forming genuine friendships with others would challenge his existing worldview. He has been so hurt by his past that he now fully believes such bonds are impossible for ogres like himself, and thus will subconsciously destroy any evidence to the contrary. Yamato is like him, and her experiences must be the same as his. When he told Yamato that her fate is to rule others by strength, his face was contorted into a monstrous, demonic form. This was the most intimidating Kaido has been so far, suggesting deep-rooted emotions were bubbling to the surface. This evidences the fact that Kaido's words in this chapter were very deeply personal, and are likely rooted in his yet-to-be-revealed backstory. He earlier told the Scabbards that the Straw Hat Pirates would inevitably turn on them, because pirate alliances always end in failure. We know the members of the Rock's Pirates share no genuine fellowship, and his relationship with Lin Lin is often outwardly hostile, so his attitude toward other pirates comes as no surprise. But here he told Yamato that her being hated is inevitable because of what she is on a fundamental level. Assuming these words are reflective of Kaido's own experiences, we can surmise quite a bit about his backstory. It isn't completely confirmed in this conversation, but Kaido seems to indicate he and Yamato are not human, and instead belong to a race of Oni or ogres, which honestly makes a lot of sense and also makes them far more interesting characters. He He told Yamato that it is her fate to be hated by others because she's an ogre, which suggests his present pessimistic outlook on friendship and camaraderie has been shaped by his own experiences as an ogre. In fact, it seems Kaido has committed himself to the warrior's path, in part because he considers it futile to resist this fate. He told Yamato that no matter what she does, the samurai will never accept her as one of them. In his experiences, deep down, those who claimed to be his friends in truth feared him and perhaps exploited his strength. Importantly, he directly related this perspective to being an ogre. So what does this tell us about Kaido's past? Essentially, there is a societal perception of ogres, which Kaido has committed to upholding because he believes people will inevitably view him through that lens. In a sense, Kaido believes society will consider him a monster no matter what he does, so why pretend otherwise? This characterization fits well with the kabuki theater motif consistently used throughout the Wano story arc. Yamato has cast herself in the role of Kozuki Oden, and is attempting to play the part of her hero in real life, at least until she inevitably passes on that mantle to Momonosuke, Oden's son and true heir. In similar fashion, Kaido has resigned himself to play the part of monstrous ogre cast for him by society. Somebody once told him the world would always view him a certain way. He set out to sea, maybe with a group of friends, maybe in pursuit of impossible dreams, maybe like Big Mom, he once held more noble aspirations. But the years started coming and they never stopped coming, and eventually it didn't make sense for him to live for fun. So now he tries very hard to fit the mold created for him based on the fact that he's an ogre, because only shooting stars break the mold. And in case I'm being too subtle with this reference, yes, Kaido is Shrek. Okay, so we get the picture. Kaido has layers, and clearly he has been lied to, potentially about being friends with someone who ultimately only valued him for his strength. I suspect there's a manipulative or abusive mentor figure in Kaido's past who both dissuaded him of the virtues of friendship and instilled in him his belief that only the strong are capable or deserving of life. I further believe there is quite a bit of narrative and thematic supporting evidence which suggests this corrupting influence in Kaido's life was a dark or evil mentor figure. Understanding the dynamics of this particular relationship on both a narrative and thematic level illuminates Kaido as an individual character, where he has been and where he's going, as well as the broader story arc of One Piece as a whole. In this section, I'm going to discuss elements of Kaido's backstory, as well as his role in the larger narrative. In so doing, I will be referencing both character archetypes and mythic story structure, commonly referred to as the hero's journey.
Oh great, well, what is a hero to you?
A hero kills people that wish him harm.
Okay.
To make these allusions clear and accessible, I very quickly first want to define those terms.
A hero is part human and part supernatural. A hero is born out of a childhood trauma or out of a disaster that must be avenged.
You are likely already familiar in some form with the cyclic pattern of the hero's journey.
Okay, you're thinking of a superhero.
We all have a hero in our heart.
Importantly, the hero's journey is descriptive rather than prescriptive. It's not a formula or cookie-cutter mold for telling stories. Evaluating stories through the lens of the hero's journey or the mythic structure outlined by Campbell offers us a loose heuristic, meaning not all stories perfectly conform to all elements of this pattern.
The code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
In The Hero with a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell distilled what he described as the monomyth, a universal structure which underlies myths, folktales, and fictional stories told in societies around the world and throughout time. Based on his work in comparative mythology, Campbell's assertion is that this mythic structure arises spontaneously through storytelling because it is representative of our inner being, or psyche, as well as our place as individual beings within the cosmos. Tales based on this mythic structure are thus popularized because they are so deeply resonant. The basic structure of the hero's journey is first departure from the known or ordinary world into one of mystery and adventure. On the road, the hero recruits allies, faces challenges, and ultimately must undergo a great ordeal in order to be transformed and rewarded with a gift or treasure, which can be used for the betterment of the ordinary world from which they first departed. The last phase of the journey is the return. The transformed hero returns to the ordinary world equipped with the gift or treasure acquired on their adventure and empowered to face the final challenge, which may entail improving or transforming the society or the broader story world. The exact terms used to define the steps of the hero's journey vary, but the general pattern is consistent: an inward journey of self-reflection, catalyzed by an adventure into the unknown, transformation and improvement, and then return. marked by an outward struggle to synthesize and reintegrate the transformed hero with the world. Despite the simplicity and universality of this model, there are seemingly limitless ways to retell stories patterned on the monomyth. Many popular works of fiction, including Star Wars, Harry Potter, and importantly One Piece, are heavily based on the monomyth. In Hollywood, following the success of Star Wars, the hero's journey has been frequently and intentionally used as a blueprint for screenwriting. As noted by Christopher Vogler in The Writer's Journey, even a film as unconventional as Pulp Fiction contains distinct elements of this mythic structure.
And I am the tyranny of evil men. But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
While some writers intentionally pattern their tales on the mythic structure outlined by Campbell and Vogler, others do so subconsciously. George Lucas intentionally built Star Wars around the mythic structure outlined by Campbell. In fact, Campbell referred to Lucas as his greatest student. Other writers like Neil Gaiman have unintentionally incorporated elements of this mythic structure. Honestly, I believe Oda likely falls into the latter category. It's unlikely One Piece's adherence to the mythic structure of the hero's journey is intentional or deliberate. Thus, the hero's journey describes an emergent, spontaneous pattern in storytelling. Just as the structure of stories may be based on immutable universal patterns, so too are many of the character archetypes which inhabit works of fiction.
If you live long enough, you see the same eyes in different people.
Campbell was himself influenced by the work of Carl Jung, who proposed the existence of archetypal forces emergent from what he described as the collective unconscious.
I should warn you that while Fraser is a Freudian, I am a Jungian. So there'll be no blaming Mother today.
You might think of this as shared source code. We're all conscious beings running on the same operating system and have the same potential for good and evil. These archetypes are ancient patterns of personality to which individuals may conform. They manifest in the real world, taking different shapes or forms when filtered through the subjective lens of the individual. The archetypes are thus likened to masks picked up and worn by individuals over the course of their life. Individual people or characters may manifest elements of multiple archetypes simultaneously or at different points in time.
We all change. When you think about it, we are all different people, all through our lives. And that's okay, that's good, you've got to keep moving so long as you remember all the people that you used to be.
Take a snapshot of any civilization in any part of the world at any point in time, and though the faces of individuals manifesting these archetypes will be different, you will invariably see the same patterns of personality represented. The hero, the mentor, the shadow, and so on. In fiction, character archetypes may be used to fulfill specific defined narrative or thematic functions. I wanted to first clarify the pattern of the hero's journey and the role of archetypes within fiction because these terms will help us recognize Kaido's role in the story and make predictions about both his backstory and his potential future role beyond Wano. At the start of this section, I suggested Kaido has likely been influenced by a dark mentor figure, which has particular thematic importance in One Piece. The meeting with the mentor is a common facet of hero myths, as described by Joseph Campbell in The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Campbell referred to the common form adopted by this archetypal figure as the helpful crone or the fairy godmother, but the mentor appears in many shapes and sizes, commonly exemplified throughout popular works of fiction. Archetypal mentor figures often provide supernatural aid and help conduct the protagonist from their ordinary world onto the road of adventure and change. One Piece as a whole, whether intentionally or unintentionally, borrows heavily from mythic story structure, and as such, the mask of the mentor archetype has been worn by numerous characters. Shanks, Rayleigh, Kozaburo, Koshiro, Bellamere, Zeph, Hirulek, Kureha, Clover, Saul, Tom, Tiger, Otohime, Pedro, Ushimaru, and Rocinante all serve as examples of characters who positively mentored members of the Straw Hat Pirates, present and potentially future, as well as their closest allies, by providing guidance and direction at pivotal moments in their lives. Commonly in myth, the mentor imparts special knowledge or gifts which equip the hero for their journey, and accordingly we have frequently seen mentor figures in One Piece serve this particular function. Shanks not only acted as a role model for Luffy by instilling in him positive moral values, he's also responsible for indirectly providing him the Gomu Gomu fruit and for gifting Luffy his treasured straw hat, an object later implied to have greater significance than has been fully revealed. In similar fashion, Rocinante reached out to Law at a low point when he was lost in his own hatred and reinvigorated Law's desire to live. He further equipped Law with his Op fruit, a power sought the world over, which allowed Law to survive his terminal sickness. Often those who wear the mask of the mentor once underwent their own hero's journey, as we see represented in Rayleigh, Roger's former first mate, who later in life guided Luffy and instructed him for 2 years while the crew was separated. We have seen repeatedly that the positive influence of the mentor has been instrumental in shaping the Straw Hats into the heroes they are slowly becoming. Kozaburo and Koshiro gave Zoro his first swords and instructed him in the way of the samurai. Bellemere encouraged Nami to draw maps, and also indulged her proclivity toward manipulation and thieving, but hey, those are traits which have served Nami pretty well in her life as a pirate. Zeph assumed the role of Sanji's father in place of Vince McJudge, and guided Sanji to be kind, chivalrous, and occasionally violent. Hirulek encouraged Chopper to embrace the traits which made him different, and to recognize both the power of medicine and impossible dreams to heal illnesses, physical and mental. Clover and Olvia demonstrated to Robin that history shapes the future and cannot afford to be forgotten, and Saul encouraged her not to let herself be consumed by the world's darkness by trusting the friends and loved ones who truly care about her. Tom taught Frankie to live life boldly, very boldly, and to do everything with Adon by not backing down and standing up for the principles and people you believe in. Jinbei's desire to actively pursue change was inspired by his fallen captain, Fisher Tiger, and his anger was effectively tempered by Queen Otohime's unflinching belief in a brighter future. As for our potential new recruits, Pedro helped Carrot see a broader world and passed on Roger's message: every person has their time to shine, adding his own corollary: keep moving forward. Whatever setbacks, however long it takes, everyone has a role and a bigger part to play, and it can only be understood and realized by persevering in the face of adversity. Yamato was inspired by the extraordinary life and legacy of Kozuki Oden, and later witnessed the dedication and self-sacrifice emblematic of the samurai, as exemplified by Shimotsuki Ushimaru. However, Oda has also subverted this relationship model through his villain characters, particularly in the New World. The inversion of the mentor-mentee relationship is fundamentally predatory, and acts as a corrupting influence. Big Mom, Doflamingo, Orochi, and Kanjuro were all guided onto their current paths by dark mentors who approached them at vulnerable points in their lives. Importantly, we have seen increasing thematic focus on cycles of abuse and hatred exemplified through these dark mentor bonds. For example, Treble radicalized young Doflamingo and shaped him into an underworld broker. In the mold of the mentor, he even gifted Dofi his devil fruit and the weapon used to assassinate his father Homing. As an adult, Doflamingo later recognized in young Law the same hatred which resided in his own heart, and attempted to corrupt Law in similar fashion, and he would likely have succeeded had Rocinante not intervened and replaced Doflamingo's emotional manipulation with genuine kindness. Lin was too young to recognize Mother Carmel's true intentions, but following the traumatic events of her birthday tea party, she was taken in and manipulated by Streusen, who shaped her into a tyrannical pirate emperor for his own benefit. Big Mom in turn corrupted her army of children and has forcibly molded most of them into loyal servants who are intent on realizing her ambition, often to their own detriment. We discussed the Kurozumi clan's potential connection to Kaido at length in the previous section, but now consider the fact that Higurushi and Semimaru first inducted Orochi into the Kurozumi plot, and then after he too was corrupted, Orochi manipulated Kanjuro into performing the part of Kozuki traitor. We thus see a growing trend in the New World of dark mentor figures responsible for creating the monsters with whom Luffy and crew come into conflict. These villains were abused or manipulated to varying degrees, but later became abusers and corrupting dark mentors themselves, passing on the will they inherited and perpetuating the pattern through successive generations. I touched on this concept earlier in the video in relation to Hody Jones, who was ultimately an empty vessel, representing the end state of this cycle. Hody was never personally affected, but was poisoned by the hatred and anger of negative role models like Arlong, by whom he was surrounded. Note that the presence of this evil influence in formative years doesn't fully absolve these antagonists of responsibility for their wrongdoing, but does explain what shaped their goals and worldview. Additionally, not all of these antagonists were equally corrupted. Some were even on the wrong path to begin with, but needed or could have potentially benefited from the intervention of a strong positive force in their lives in place of the negative reinforcement received from their dark mentors. Kanjuro is a great example of a character who might have turned out differently. He was deceived by Orochi, but had he first met Oden, his fellowship with the other retainers would likely have been genuine. Conversely, Doflamingo was already bad, but was clearly made worse by Treble. I will say that though Treble did radicalize Doflamingo and direct his path in life, Rocinante believed his brother was rotten to the core. Indeed, Rocinante and Doflamingo emerged from the same society, but turned out very differently. Doflamingo certainly wasn't framed as sympathetic in any way, and among the villains in the New World, he comes the closest to being pure evil. He wasn't at all receptive to the positive values espoused by his parents, and brutally rejected them in the vilest way possible. Dissimilarly, despite her violent hunger-induced outbursts, Lin was a relatively innocent and unassuming child, long before she adopted the monstrous persona of Big Mom. We even saw that losing her memories somehow transformed her into a far more docile and warm-hearted persona of Olin. At this point, it's unclear where Kaido falls on the spectrum. Was he rotten from the start, or did he once have higher aspirations? He seemed far more idealistic and jovial when he first recruited Albert on Punk Hazard. While he's certainly a brutal tyrant at his current stage in life, I believe the hints of deep emotion bubbling to the surface suggest he's far more similar to Big Mom, someone who is deeply traumatized, corrupted, and psychologically manipulated by a powerful, influential figure. In any case, the fact that this dark mentor relationship has been repeated for nearly all of the New World's villains suggests Kaido was similarly shaped into what he is now through the corrupting influence of a persuasive figure in his past, which I suspect will be revealed in an upcoming flashback. But who could this dark mentor have been for Kaido, and what was the nature of their relationship? It's certainly possible, given Kaido's former position as an apprentice, that Rocksteady Xebec was Kaido's evil mentor figure, but I'm not sure the timeline quite adds up. Kaido is presently 59 years old, meaning he was 19 when Rocks formed, and 21 at the time the Rocks Pirates were disbanded. Kaido was the same age Zoro and Sanji are now during the Rocks era, which means he wasn't exactly young and impressionable despite his low rank among this former supergroup. The barely contained hostility among the members of Rocks may inform Kaido's distrust of pirate alliances, but doesn't adequately explain his worldview or his present goals. Further, given the fact that Kaido emphasized Yamato's Oni heritage while asserting the folly of friendship, the paramount importance of strength, and the necessity of rulership through fear, I think it's far more likely a more primary relationship from even earlier in his life is responsible for Kaido arriving at his presently held beliefs. And of course, this pattern is cyclical, which suggests the ogres have been similarly regarded throughout history, maligned and misunderstood, much like the fishmen, minks, and others. Kaido may have even been more idealistic in his youth, but was quickly and thoroughly dissuaded of any fanciful notion that value may be found in friendship. But how far back in time does this pattern extend, and what does Yamato's defiance of her father represent? Notably, just as we have seen those abused or manipulated turn into abusers and manipulators, we have also seen the cyclical pattern of positive mentorship as a counterbalancing force for good in the One Piece world. Those who have been positively mentored in turn pass on the will they have inherited to others. In fact, this is one of the central themes of the entire series and the mechanism by which One Piece and the true history have been guarded for centuries: inherited will. We can even see the pattern of positive mentorship represented through members of the Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy's values and dreams were shaped by his childhood encounters with Shanks, and now as he draws very near to assuming the mantle of Pirate King, Luffy has taken up the role of mentor to Momonosuke and Tama. In fact, though he maintains his lovably goofy and carefree demeanor, Luffy has significantly matured in the New World and grown into his newfound position of leadership. Throughout the raid on Onigashima, Luffy has never lost sight of his goal or the stakes involved, and has been instrumental in helping Momonosuke reach his true potential. On Fishman Island, Luffy said he didn't want to be viewed as a hero, and in typical Luffy fashion, used a food-based metaphor to explain his rationale. Because, you see, a hero is a person who shares their meat, and Luffy just wants to eat his fill and then some.
I don't care what they say about me, I just want to eat.
But this same metaphor has been used to demonstrate Luffy's maturation as he has battled against two Emperors of the Sea, Big Mom and Kaido, on their home turf. He went from Whole Cake Island, a land of feast and excessive indulgence, to Wano, a vast and desolate land of famine. Despite Luffy downplaying his heroic qualities a few arcs earlier by insisting on his own desire to overindulge his appetite, inspired by meeting Tama, he's now actively fighting to make Wano a land where no one will go hungry, and was enraged by the Beast Pirates wasting Oshiruko because Tama and the other people of Wano have been forced to go without for so long. Shanks' values inspired Luffy, and now he's passing on those same values to a new generation. We have also seen that this cyclic pattern of hatred and abuse can be broken, and I suspect these themes and recurrent motifs have been intentionally introduced because they have global significance to the broader One Piece world. Law managed to avert the trap of the heavenly demon spider because a force for good entered his life at a critical moment, and even then it further took reinforcement and assistance from Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates for him to finally break free from Doflamingo's grasp. Pudding was fully complicit in Big Mom's Vinsmoke massacre plot, but was for the first time shown genuine, selfless kindness by Sanji, and instead was swayed to play an instrumental role in helping the Straw Hats escape from Whole Cake Island. Yamato was similarly motivated to break from her father's path because of the inspiring life, death, and legacy of Kozuki Oden. Yamato later had the opportunity to guide and instruct Oden's son Momonosuke based on the message recorded by his father. In so doing, she has passed on Oden's will and helped prepare Momo for the pivotal role he's ultimately meant to play. That ray of hope is exactly what the Straw Hat Pirates represent. As Vivi said to the crowd in Alubarna, when she set out to sea to infiltrate Baroque Works and dismantle Crocodile's plot, in the darkness of the storm, she encountered a ship and crew which gave her a push and encouraged her to see the light. The Straw Hat Pirates, sailing aboard their ship Thousand Sunny, travel the seas in pursuit of impossible dreams, and along the way bring light to the dark places they visit. A new dawn is coming for the One Piece world, and I suspect that when the true history is revealed, we will learn that this cycle of abuse and manipulation has been perpetuated in the halls of power for centuries, if not millennia. The present conflicts in the One Piece world began many centuries earlier, potentially long before even the 100-year void. The Celestial Dragons and world government were not formed in their present state, and I believe given the role Vivi's ancestor played in supporting the 20 Kings, the founders may have believed themselves to be righteous, and that there may have been just cause, or at the very least, appeared to be just cause in opposing the Forgotten Kingdom, which seemingly possessed, and perhaps deified, the three ancient weapons, Poseidon, Pluton, and Uranus. When and how the conflict between the 20 Kings and the Forgotten Kingdom began is a separate topic, but importantly the implicit issue not yet addressed in discussing the pattern of victims becoming villains and reproducing others in their same mold is primordial evil, or original sin. It's all well and fine to say evil begets evil, but there must have been a true origin point. We know the cycle can be broken, that a new dawn can rise on dark seas, and that individuals can change. But what is the source of corruption in the One Piece world? When and how did this cycle begin? Who does Luffy need to punch to make the world better? The mortal players currently inhabiting the stage didn't start the fire. No, they didn't light it, but they tried to fight it. Kaido, Big Mom, and even Teach represent localized rather than global evil. They are symptoms, but not the disease. What evil lies at the heart of the One Piece world, and how must it be confronted? I believe it's important to understand the overall narrative and thematic structure of One Piece because it informs the characters most closely related to the central conflict, like Kaido, Big Mom, Shanks, and Teach. It tells us what overcoming Kaido means for Luffy and how it will shape him for the bigger conflicts to come. The Emperors, in particular, are far more than mere obstacles in Luffy's path. As noted earlier in the video, the Four Emperors are the first villains Oda imagined when developing the concept for One Piece, and thus it's no small coincidence Kaido is so deeply tied to the central conflict both narratively and thematically. His flashback will likely reveal, at least in part, how the ogres relate to the world's history and where Kaido's will, inherited from his dark mentor, truly originated. Luffy needs to understand his enemies' origins and motivations because these characters are mere links in the chain, and the Pirate King, through inheriting One Piece, the true history, and the will passed down through many centuries, will need to trace this cycle to its origin point and break the chain entirely in order to bring the new dawn. Returning to the hero's journey model outlined at the start of this section, Luffy is currently on the road of challenges where he meets allies and faces enemies in the archetypal molds of the Shadow and the Threshold Guardian in preparation for his great ordeal, transformation following discovery of One Piece. The last part of the story is a separate voyage of return, the Great War foreshadowed by Whitebeard, precipitated by rising up to challenge the world and shoulder the burden of history in the way Roger never could. The trials have become harder for the Straw Hats, not only because their enemies have grown stronger, but because their enemies' motivations have become more complex, and they have challenged the crew to see the bigger picture, to widen their focus to the broader conflicts in the One Piece world around them, as well as the deep-rooted systems which continually produce villains in the same mold. The conflict on Wano is so large in scope because the Straw Hats are now grappling not only with powerful pirates standing in the way of them achieving their personal goals, but also with entrenched systems perpetuated by the very same forces, inherited will, dreams, and fate, which propel them toward Laugh-Tale, and this is by design. The Straw Hats need to face their own dark side, so to speak, before they will be ready to rise up and challenge the world. In fiction, the archetypal Shadow is most often representative of the hero's own dark potential. For example, in Star Wars, Darth Vader is a representation of what Luke could become if he turns to the dark side. Within the world of One Piece, Blackbeard fills the role of the hero's shadow to Luffy. Like Luffy, Teach also pursues impossible dreams, is guided by the hand of fate, and seeks to maximize personal freedom. Yet Teach is Luffy's moral antithesis in that though he may want the same things as Luffy, he has repeatedly demonstrated his willingness to lie, cheat, steal, and murder to achieve his goals. He's not Luffy's thematic foil, but as the hero's shadow, questions the validity of the virtues Luffy espouses and demonstrates the dark potential of Luffy's dream and ambition. Kaido and Big Mom are also shades of this same shadow archetype. I bring up this topic because, importantly, the shadow, the main character's evil opposite, is most often not synonymous with or directly representative of the cosmic source of primordial evil within the story world. Reusing the Star Wars example, Darth Vader is Luke's shadow, but the Emperor is the ultimate source of evil, the one who tempted Vader to the dark side and sought to subdue Luke in similar fashion. This distinction is important because the way the protagonist reconciles the conflict with the shadow is often quite different from the destruction or mitigation of the primordial evil force. This is sort of intuitive. The shadow is a representation of the protagonist's potential internal evil, while the latter is an external evil force which attacks and corrupts the entire ecosystem of the story world. A protagonist needs to recognize and neutralize their own dark side before they're fit to challenge the cosmic or universal evil which plagues the story world as a whole. The New World is the last leg of the voyage before Luffy and crew will be equipped with heavily guarded knowledge and power to confront this primordial evil, and thus are first being challenged by the shadow archetype, antagonists like Kaido, Big Mom, and Teach. In One Piece, those like Kaido who failed to break the chain, who were taken in and persuaded by an evil influencer, are tragic in their own way, even if they aren't portrayed in a sympathetic light. Learning about the history of the Sun Pirates did nothing to soften readers' view of Arlong, for example, but we are now better able to understand how he became such a monster and to recognize the inherent tragedy that in a different set of circumstances he may have been much different. We further see through Hody Jones that the true form of evil is the entrenched pattern which continuously produces villains in the same mold. We thus later see both how this pattern perpetuates and importantly how it can be broken. Kaido tried to keep Yamato in shackles, but she broke her chains long before Luffy helped unbind her wrists, when she refused to follow down Kaido's path and accept his ideals and worldview. In truth, Kaido is the one bound to a cycle which extends back through history, and understanding the importance of this pattern narratively and thematically allows us to extrapolate numerous details about his personal origin story, the Society of Ogres, which potentially exists somewhere in the Grand Line, and how Kaido's story is likely to resolve. Again, Kaido, Big Mom, and most significantly Teach are all shades of the shadow archetype. They are driven by the same forces as Luffy and seek the same goal, even if their motivation to do so varies significantly. This means that in a sense, they represent what Luffy could have been were it not for the positive mentorship he received from Shanks. The differentiating factors between Luffy and the other emperors are his moral compass and code of ethics. Luffy and the Straw Hats are pursuing the same targets as the emperors and thus are susceptible to the same pitfalls which trap their enemies. It's only by recognizing his own dark potential and the nature of this cyclical pattern that Luffy will truly become capable of challenging the world and the dark cosmic or primordial source of evil. They need to understand both the good and bad which can result from transforming the world by strength of will, and by pursuing and promoting unfettered freedom. Oda is emphasizing this pattern of hatred and evil because it needs to be broken on a global scale. Inherited will is one of the central themes of One Piece, and fittingly this will is passed on through mentor figures, both positive and negative. As Whitebeard said of the Will of D, it's passed down through the ages from ancient times, but is inherited will good, bad, or somewhere in between? In narrative, theme is a question, not an answer. According to John York, a theory is posited, an argument explored, and a conclusion reached. That in a nutshell is what theme is.
I don't even know what the theme is. What's the theme?
Roger asserted inherited will, dreams, and fate are the immutable forces which will ultimately restore freedom to the One Piece world by guiding the right successor to One Piece at the right time. Joy Boy and his allies around the world, who have waited patiently for centuries, have also held this same conviction. But is this assertion true? Was Roger correct? That's the theory posited, which must ultimately be tested. Just as Roger's will has survived in Luffy, so too has the will of Xebec apparently been inherited by Marshal D. Teach or Blackbeard. The Great Pirate Era initiated by Roger is the testing ground. It's the argument explored. Luffy represents affirmation of Roger's faith in these forces, while Blackbeard and other pirates like Kaido and Big Mom, to varying degrees, represent the dark alternative. Both have inherited will from those who came before them, one to do evil and one to do good. Which pirate discovers One Piece and becomes the Pirate King decides whether Roger's faith in inherited will, dreams, and destiny was well founded. If Teach arrives first, Roger was wrong, and the forces he trusted failed to deliver the right person.
I have failed you.
But if Luffy prevails, he synthesizes and surpasses the various shades of the shadow, then Roger's faith will have been rewarded by the one he has been waiting for.
Vindication!
Either way, when One Piece is discovered, a conclusion will be reached. Essentially, inherited will, dreams, and fate have been asserted as the forces capable of ending the current reign of evil in the world of One Piece. This is a hypothesis which must be robustly tested. Luffy, the hero, as well as Teach, Kaido, and Big Mom, the Shadow, are moved by these same forces and are competing to decide who gets to inherit One Piece and thus decide the validity of the story's central themes. Throughout the first part of the voyage through Paradise, Oda focused on demonstrating the positive influence of dreams and inherited will while gathering the crew, but now those themes are being tested in the second half of the Grand Line as the Straw Hats repeatedly clash with villains whose evil ambitions are equally rooted in tragedy and whose wills have been inherited through the influence of dark mentor figures. We can thus project that Kaido's story is similarly rooted in these thematic motifs. The Shadow archetype is the character who most directly challenges the protagonist's quest, but ultimately must be recognized and synthesized. The hero must reconcile their own dark potential before they can take the knowledge and power received through the journey to return and confront the source of evil or injustice. Luffy's conflict with Kaido is thus representative of confronting the Shadow. In that sense, I believe it's important Kaido be more fully understood before the battle draws to a close, because just as the potential for evil which transformed Kaido into a monster exists within Luffy, so too did the good in Luffy likely once reside as a potential within Kaido. Breaking this cycle means not repaying evil with evil. And accordingly, I believe we will see this higher ideal reflected in the conclusion to this battle and epic story arc, because Wano is a microcosm of the broader One Piece world. Most of you are likely familiar with the concept that most villains, wearing the mask of the Shadow archetype, view themselves as the heroes of their own myths. Oda has said he doesn't often kill characters, particularly villains, because it's more important for Luffy to break their will than to end their life. And he's very right, particularly in regard to villains in the mold of the Shadow. Crushed will or ambition represents a breaking of the antagonist's delusion that they are in fact the hero. It means recognizing their actions and beliefs as erroneous. Often we see a begrudging respect for Luffy develop in the enemies he has bested. Despite his negative impact on the land and people of Wano, and the devastating effect he would have on the world by instigating a global war, Kaido insisted to Yamato that life isn't defined by a series of simple questions with easy answers, which indicates he has considered these ramifications justifiable or necessary to achieve what he presently believes is a higher ideal. Like Thanos, who sought to balance the universe by walking a path of death and destruction, Kaido views himself as the hero of his own story, and thus a satisfying end, a reconciling of the hero and the Shadow, in this instance will likely entail breaking his will and dissuading him of his present conviction. The origin of the will passed on to Kaido by his dark mentor, and potentially endemic to the broader society of Oni, if they indeed exist, may further shed light on the primordial source of evil Luffy and the Straw Hats will ultimately confront. I have more to say on this particular topic, but want to remain focused on Kaido for the time being. One of the last questions I will attempt to answer in this video is how Kaido's story on Wano will end, with death, redemption, or perhaps something in between. I think it's worth considering Oda's established pattern for resolving narrative conflict and meting out justice as we examine the various options, but before that we're next going to return to the topic of understanding and unraveling Kaido's immediate goals. We have thoroughly discussed the potential origin of Kaido's ambition, but what does he actually want and why does he want it? What truly motivates him to plunge the world into a global war?
Pain. That's it.
I've been saying for some time that while we know Kaido's goals, we don't understand his motivating desire, which I think was partially illuminated through his encounter with Yamato. His desire to start a global war was recontextualized in light of this new information. Yes, Kaido wants to die. Yes, he wants to raise up a warrior capable of ending his life. Yes, he wants to go out in a blaze of glory to capstone his life as a warrior. Those all answer the what questions, but now we're beginning to understand the why. Because it's lonely at the top. Because strength, insurmountable strength, means you're destined to be loathed and feared, and impossibly strong is exactly what ogres or oni are believed to be. It also means you're destined to be abused. No friends can be trusted, no alliances can last. So Kaido wants to start a war to destroy this dreary world, because he so fundamentally despises the world's value structure. That sentiment neatly dovetails with Doflamingo's root desire to burn the entire world infrastructure to the ground in order to spite the celestial dragons, but for different reasons. Kaido aims to create a world of constant war, where the strong live and the weak die, because strength is all he now values. Everything else is a lie. Interestingly, as Kaido told King when they first met on Punk Hazard, he believes he's the only one capable of changing the world, and given his established value structure, I imagine this belief is predicated on his reputation as the world's strongest creature. Kaido believes his strength makes him the only one capable of changing the world, which again emphasizes the fact that his actions are in service of what he believes to be a higher ideal or goal. King has unwavering faith in Kaido's ability to become the Pirate King, and we know he wants to hunt down the ancient weapons, all for the purpose of fundamentally reshaping the world. Something important to keep in mind is Kaido's awareness of the myth of Joy Boy, a name thus far only known to those who have deciphered the poneglyphs like Robin, Odin, and Roger. Kaido seems to believe that Joy Boy is going to be the world's strongest, the one who surpasses him in combat. King still believes Kaido represents Joy Boy's return, but Kaido seems to have himself abandoned this notion, and now Zunisha, after hearing the drums of liberation beating in Luffy's heart with the awakening of his Nika powers, has affirmed Luffy represents the long-awaited return of Joy Boy. But what exactly does this mean, and how does it relate to Kaido's desire to succeed Roger? What does it mean to be the Pirate King, and how does this relate to Joy Boy and Kaido's desire to transform the world? So first, I don't think it's at all surprising that Luffy represents Joy Boy's return. I think it's been pretty clear since Fishman Island that Luffy would someday take up Joy Boy's mantle. Inherited will is one of the central themes in One Piece, as asserted by the quote by Roger which accompanied Dragon's introduction in chapter 100. These things cannot be stopped, an inherited strength of will, one's dreams, the ebb and flow of the ages. As long as people hunger for freedom, these things will exist. Specifically, the central theme of One Piece is the pursuit of freedom. Luffy's fundamental motivation for becoming Pirate King is to be the person in the world who is the most free. On that note, Gold Roger, who learned the true history of the world, asserted fate, inherited will, and dreams as the immutable forces which will raise up the champion of freedom the world needs at the right time. But it's also important to remember that in narrative, theme is a question, not an answer. It's an argument explored and a conclusion reached. Roger's assertion must be tested, and that's exactly what shadows of the hero like Kaido, Big Mom, and Blackbeard represent. Zunisha says it hears the drums of liberation beating for the first time in centuries, which, references to Banksaki aside, I believe is metaphorical. Joy Boy was the world's champion for freedom during the Void Century, but for some reason he failed.
Oh, well, I tried to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone turned up.
And his crew accepted their fate and left behind their message for those who will someday inherit their will. The willing acceptance and embrace of death in service of a higher ideal is reflected in those who carry the name D, as well as the symbol of piracy, the grinning skull or the Jolly Roger. As the song Banksaki says, doesn't matter who you are, someday you'll just be bones. As I will soon elaborate on in an upcoming video, I believe Joy Boy was the world's first forgotten Pirate King, the reign of the Lunarians from their land of gods atop the Red Wall, long before the Celestial Dragons, coupled with the Age of the Sea Circle calendar, indicates the existence of an evil oppressive force which has been at work since long before the Void Century. Joy Boy, as Pirate King, may have attempted to build a loosely affiliated nation of pirates patterned on the myth of Libertalia, which ultimately collapsed for yet to be revealed reasons. The ambitions of the emperors, Kaido, Big Mom, and Teach, represent dark, mirrored reflections of the world Joy Boy was trying to build, but Luffy has now arrived as his true successor, the one for whom Roger, Joy Boy, and his allies have been waiting for centuries. Simply put, Joy Boy is dead. He was a mortal man who lived a life of adventure and left behind his tale full of laughs, whose efforts to liberate the world proved unsuccessful, but a new dawn is now approaching. Kaido's desire to change the world is a reflection of Joy Boy's ambition, but is corrupted by his erroneous belief that strength is all that matters, and that survival of the fittest should be the only law of the land in the new world created by Roger and Joy Boy's successor. Kaido and Big Mom both desire to become the Pirate King, to fundamentally change the world, but their visions for what the transformed world would become are very different. Big Mom imagines a world where everyone lives in harmony and is free to partake in sugary indulgence, but of course the voracious appetite which underlies her ambition distorts her dream by extracting the souls of the very people with whom she wishes to joyously commune. Conversely, Kaido envisions a world of constant war, where the strong prevail over the weak and rise to the top. Anyone who submits admits their place in this pecking order.
Alright, maggots, listen up. Popo's about to teach you the pecking order.
And defers to the alpha at the top of the pack of beasts, is free to be part of Kaido's in-group, and challenge for dominance is constantly invited, with death completing a warrior's path. Kaido holds strength as the highest virtue, and envisions a world where the entire society is structured around its supremacy. Yet despite his adamant adherence to this twisted worldview, his emotions also seemingly betray his subconscious desire to be free from his own warped ideology, which was potentially foisted upon him by his dark mentor or by his society of origin. Kaido has no friends, no allies, just a lonely island of demons where he's destined to rule by strength alone. But if someone can kill him, he's not the strongest anymore. He's not the guy at the very top of the food chain. Death is the price Kaido needs to pay to no longer be reviled for being the world's so-called strongest living creature. He demands Yamato accept and resign herself to her fate, but has he truly accepted his own? Or is he still subconsciously motivated to find the one person who can best him in combat one-on-one, because completing his path as a warrior will also paradoxically release him from his fate? Kaido constantly drinks heavily and weeps, likely because his feelings betray him. He deep down wants those friends he believes he can never have. He secretly harbors a desire to be respected for anything other than his strength alone, a desire perhaps deeply suppressed and unbeknownst even to himself. He even practices the art of the drunken fist, becoming stronger while inebriated, when his true emotions emerge. Luffy indicated Kaido's will or haki is actually stronger while under the influence, perhaps because freeing himself from his inhibitions and shedding his faux stoic resolve exposes his true ambition. In vino veritas.
Thank you, alcohol.
Maybe he even outwardly hoped for those things in his younger years. In chapter 1041, Kaido nostalgically mused about his first meeting with Linlin, after sensing she had been defeated by Law and Kid. While Kaido was clearly already aware that Big Mom intended to eventually betray him, his drunken speech suggests he wished their alliance was genuine. He lamented the fact that she was defeated so soon on the heels of their rekindling an alliance to claim One Piece. This suggests that on a subconscious level, Kaido wishes their bond was genuine despite his conscious awareness of Linlin's duplicity, which basically says deep down, Kaido wants a friend. It's interesting we still know nothing about Yamato's mother, who was apparently already out of the picture by the time Yamato was 8 years old. Yamato's existence likely indicates Kaido may have once trusted someone, but perhaps ending that relationship, tragic or otherwise, helped shape or at least reinforce his presently held worldview. As we will soon discuss, because Oda emphasizes not only plot and narrative structure, but character in his writing, Kaido's ending will likely reconcile his outward ambition with his internal desires, but what form that takes remains to be seen. Kaido may or may not be too far gone now, but those opportunities for friendship and dreams remain open to Yamato because she remains open herself, despite all the pain she has endured. Which of course leads us back to the question of whether or not Yamato will join the Straw Hat Pirates. While I'm still not 100% sold on Yamato joining the crew, the past several chapters have certainly significantly raised her chances of joining. I still have some concerns and questions. Most importantly, I still want to have a clearer picture of exactly what Yamato's dream could be before being fully on board with her joining the crew. There are still many aspects of Yamato which seem very specific to Wano. That being said, the fact that she and Kaido seemingly originate from this mysterious Oni race means there's more to Yamato's story which Oda can explore in the future. Her desire to be Odin works within the context of the Wano story arc, but I think it would wear thin as the sole motivating force driving her character, particularly as a member of the crew. Going forward, I'd like to find out more about Yamato as an individual, and learning more about the backstory of the Oni race could certainly open up some interesting directions to take her character. The fact that she is called Ogre Princess even suggests she and Kaido may hold nobility among the Oni. If the history of the Oni race is to be explored in the future through Yamato as she sails with the Straw Hat Pirates, it's less likely we'll learn about the Oni through a potential Kaido flashback during the Wano story arc, but that doesn't stop us from speculating about what the Oni could be, where they come from, and whether or not they have any historical connection to the land of samurai. In the next section, I'm going to discuss the potential ties between Kaido's Oni race and the ancient giants. Kaido was 15 at the time he joined Rocks, which suggests he likely spent his formative years in which he encountered his dark mentor figure immersed in the society from which he later emerged. Could this dark mentor be the one who convinced Kaido that friendship is futile, or did they simply plant the seed of an idea which, watered and nourished by his experiences during his life as a pirate, later grew into Kaido's present pessimistic worldview? This is just my personal speculation at this point, but putting together all of the topics we've touched on in this video, it would seem Kaido's dark mentor instilled in him his belief that ogres must rule others through strength. Perhaps Kaido initially resisted or even outright rejected this notion, and set out to sea much like Luffy in pursuit of impossible dreams, searching for the true friends he was told he could never have. Unfortunately, he didn't form close bonds of genuine fellowship among the crew he happened to join. Rocks was filled with infighting, and Xebec himself was bent on world domination. When Rocks later fell apart, Kaido was gifted his mythical fish fruit, which made him even stronger, nigh indestructible in fact. If the theory outlined in earlier sections is correct, then the mythical fish fruit imbues Kaido with incredibly good fortune, particularly in one-on-one battles, leading to his reputation as the world's strongest living creature. The world government tried desperately to recover this sacred treasure, but failed repeatedly to take Kaido's life. He was captured and experimented on, but nevertheless retained his belief that he was capable of changing the world. This is when we saw him meet King on Punk Hazard, but another incident must have happened later, which made Kaido far more cynical and jaded. The light finally vanished from his eyes, and he fully embraced the teachings of his dark mentor, thus channeling the archetypal shadow. Perhaps this is where Yamato's absent mother enters the picture, a person Kaido trusted who either betrayed him and attempted to exploit his strength, reinforcing his belief that friendship cannot be trusted, or simply died, further emphasizing Kaido's underlying errant worldview that only the strongest survive while the weak inevitably perish. In either case, Kaido has now deeply repressed his desire to form genuine bonds of fellowship, hiding behind his faux stoic resolve, only broken by his excessive drinking, hence his conqueror's haki or willpower increasing in strength while under the influence. Now all that remains for Kaido, at least on a conscious level, is completion of his warrior's path, yet ironically his devil fruit, which in part makes him such a powerful warrior, has repeatedly prevented him from achieving the brilliant death he so desperately desires. Now out of options, Kaido wants to start a global war, both because he has accepted his dark mentor's philosophy that the strong must rule over the weak, and because he personally hopes to at last encounter a worthy enough opponent to release him from his fate. Of course, the biggest question as Wano enters its climax, will Luffy, the future Pirate King, be the one to at last best Kaido in one-on-one combat? Or will he instead rely on the assistance of the 9 Shadows from Toki's prophecy? This is a topic I'm going to discuss in depth in a later video, but remember, Kaido's worldview is fundamentally flawed. This is a topic we discussed earlier. As an embodiment of the Shadow archetype, Kaido represents Luffy's dark potential. He desires the same things as Luffy, to find the One Piece and become the next Pirate King, to succeed Roger and Joy Boy. The One Piece world is in a darkened state and needs to be transformed, just as Kaido hopes to achieve. But the question, which can only be answered when someone at last discovers One Piece, is what form this new world is going to take. Unseating the world's oppressors will be no easy task. Luffy must succeed where both Roger and Joy Boy failed. Harder still will be the task of deciding what new societal structure will be built atop the rubble of the old, and the future Pirate King will play a pivotal role in helping reshape the world. Kaido erroneously envisions a world centered entirely on strength. Physical strength is of course necessary to overcome the very real dark forces which will not cede power without a fight, and to preserve the newly achieved peace at the end of the series. Yet Luffy's greatest virtue, as stated by Mihawk, is his ability to form bonds of fellowship wherever he goes. That's what truly makes him a worthy successor to Joy Boy, capable of guarding the dreams and visions of both the people of Wano and the rest of the world. It's certainly possible Luffy will simply overpower Kaido, but wouldn't this outcome only serve to reinforce Kaido's presently held false conviction that the new Joy Boy must be the world's strongest. As we discussed, a reconciling of the hero and the shadow often entails recognition of the point where the latter went astray. Or in other words, for Kaido's will to be broken, he must recognize where he went wrong. What factor truly differentiates him from Luffy? What truly makes Luffy worthy of becoming Joy Boy is not the fact that he's going to best Kaido in combat, but that he can form bonds of fellowship with the people of Wano. That he's willing to put his own life on the line to protect the dreams of others. Luffy saw these qualities demonstrated by his positive mentor figure, red-haired Shanks, but Kaido had no such advantage. All of the influential figures in Kaido's life were either manipulative or abusive. Kaido's quest to become Pirate King and to succeed Joy Boy is doomed to failure, not because he's lacking in strength, but because he fails to understand strength must be tempered by kindness and compassion. Whatever lesson Kaido learned from his dark mentor has poisoned his perception of the world, and a lifetime of negative experiences has reinforced this teaching, and convinced him that genuine friendship is impossible for ogres like himself. Yet Kaido's true emotions, which only rarely bubble to the surface, betray his underlying subconscious desire to form genuine friendships, which will continue to elude him as long as he clings to his false belief that such bonds are impossible. Perhaps then the Akazaya Samurai, whom Kaido has repeatedly dismissed as weak and unworthy, the 9 shadows of Toki's prophecy, will be the key to Luffy's eventual victory. Luffy has already gone the distance with Kaido, proving himself a capable warrior, but what truly puts him over the top is his moral character and the bonds of fellowship he forms. Yes, it's very much a cliché and a common trope in shonen manga series, but the primary differentiating factor between Luffy and Kaido is the power of friendship. It's difficult to say how Kaido's personal journey is going to end, but perhaps his desire to form genuine friendship, which spurred him out to sea many years earlier, will now live on and finally be realized through his daughter Yamato. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing, and remember to hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. But most important, make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments.